I do have a few handouts, but I wasn't sure that we were going to have a room that had any kind of multimedia ability. So I tried to prepare everything for us in a way that we wouldn't have to use any of that unless we had to. So I provided like a link resource thing. And so that's what those QR codes are that are posted up right here on the walls. Or there's a short link that you can go to that'll just have some actual links of some of the stuff that I'm talking about. So you can write down, as short as I could make it was, I don't even go right on, but it's tiny.cc, and that's the short part, and then you do a /, and then it's social media links. And that's going to link you to a whole bunch of stuff that I had talked to and kind of collected some different stuff that I'll talk about and reference, some videos we'll talk about, all that stuff. So it's tiny.cc, and then a / social media links. Or if you scan that QR code, it'll take you right there. That's just going to forward you off to a post on our website. I'm from First Christian in Greenville, and so that'll post a post on our website. So if you forget the tiny.cc social media links, you could go onto our First Christian in Greenville, Tennessee, our website, and there's a post on there under our student ministry that just talks about some links and some reference stuff from what we're going to talk about. And I thought that would be really helpful, because a lot of the information is just way more than what I could give to you, but what I think would be that some of your interest may be sparked and say, I'd like to learn more about that. And so that's why I really wanted to provide those links. So make sure you get that. And then I have a few hard copies of some stuff that's up here. If you feel like you would not want to go find that stuff, I printed out a few, but I didn't want to waste a ton of paper, so I have about 10 copies of each thing up there. So we're talking about social media, we're talking about hyper-connected students, and really just want to lay some groundwork first, want to talk a little bit about what that would be, and then I really hope that we can have some interaction, and that we can do some questions, because there are 2 or 3 different ways that we could spend our time today, and I want to kind of gauge where you guys are in that. So we'll begin by just with some groundwork. Social media or social networks are those things that the students are getting on. Facebook is the most popular social media outlet in the world, and there are other ones like in China that are huge that we don't really use over here, but as far as the United States, and we're talking about Facebook, we're talking about Twitter, we're talking about Instagram. These are your social media, social network things that our students are participating in. And so if you go online and you just kind of search, you can find these cool little graphics that talk about what social media would be, and this is just one of the ones that I printed out. You can go and just search social media overview, and you can get these little graphics, and these are helpful little graphics to have, but just talk about what are the social media designed for. And this quadrant up here is relationship building, and this one down here is called content distribution, and so that's like a YouTube thing. And then rating and tagging, that's what a lot of the Dig and Reddit stuff is for. And then your entertainment, and that's the online gaming stuff. And so you have The Sims and the Second Life and things like that, which are all social networks that are surrounded upon a game. The one that we're most familiar with would be information sharing, and that's the Facebook, and that's the Twitter and Instagram stuff that we're talking about. Another helpful graphic as far as kind of, and I'll have these up here, you guys can look at these. I don't have them on the screen because I didn't know that we would have a screen. But this graphic here talks about who's using what platform. And so we have Facebook and YouTube, and it kind of just breaks it down. So you can see the circles there. You probably can't see exactly what they are, but the red circle is female to male users, so the blue's male, and pink there is the female. So that's just under these platforms here, what are male and what are female. And then the age groups are down here. And the one that we would be concerned with for the student ministry would be the 16 to 24, so it's this dark blue. And so you can see the percentage of users on those. And so a lot of you are probably, this LinkedIn is very familiar. If you're an adult and you're a business person, you can see that that's a whole lot higher on some of the older ones than what the teens would be using on that one. So that's an interesting graphic to look at as well. But as we talk about social networking and we think about what social media would be, one of the most important things for us to talk about is understand what they are, to be engaged with it, to know what students are doing when they're online on their devices, and to not just play ignorant. I think that's just a really bad thing that we could do. So I'd love for us to talk about why that happens and what's going on with social media. In a general sense, for social media, it's a way that connections are going to happen for students, and they're going to get on and they're going to post something, and it's all based upon connections. Most of you looking around are growing up, and basically the general rule is if you are 25 or older, you can remember the first time that you got internet. And that was a big deal coming to your house, was the internet coming to your house. If you are under 25 years old, there's a good chance that you don't remember that. Certainly our high school and middle school students have always known the internet. And it's a reality that they have thought it just always was. They know nothing else. And so for us, though, we can remember, and so we can actually feel the marked change in our lives when we got internet and when we were able to then communicate instantly with someone else. I remember that for me when I was in high school and we could do the instant messaging. And this was, of course, when I was in high school, we did instant messaging. You had to dial up. And so internet wasn't always on, and that's a big change from what we have today, is it's not always on, but that you had to dial up and then you could instant message, and that was incredible. You could transport yourself to be talking to somebody else instantaneously, multiple people at a time. It was like having a group phone call, but you have to pay for the group phone call because you couldn't afford those things. Nobody had three-way calling. It was a pretty high dollar feature. But it's similar to a telephone in that you can instantly transport where you are to be with someone else. And so if we picked up a telephone right now and we were to call somebody else, you're transporting your presence to being with them. And we're going to talk about kind of your presence and your connection. I want to just say that if you think about presence and connection being something that's very subjective, because it is. And so you might be, your physical body is in this room right now, but some of you may feel like you're not present, you're not here. It's a very subjective thing. You may actually feel like you're mentally somewhere else, you're daydreaming, you're whatever, but you're physically in this room. Physical body doesn't always necessarily connote that you're going to be present there, and it doesn't always equal the same. We can be in a whole other world daydreaming, and yet we're physically in a location. But when we talk about our presence, when you call somebody on the phone, you can be in the state of Tennessee, call someone in California, and you can be present with them in a moment with your voice and with your thought and with your attention. It can be present there. It's this crazy thing that actually happens that you can instantly go and be present there. Now, the onset of FaceTime and video calls and all of the different ways that we have to be present is wildly beyond what it was even 10 years ago. I think about how quickly technology has moved along and how we can make our presence somewhere else. I love that I can FaceTime with my wife. She was out of town this past week on a job trip, and we could FaceTime with the children, and she could be present in the room with us and virtually in the room, and yet she was a few states away. It's incredible how that happens. But what we want to think about is, where are we present? How am I engaging with the people that are around me? And what happens in social media is that, in particular with the onset of a smartphone, is you think about the ability to have all of your Facebook friends. And how many of you are Facebook users? Is everyone a Facebook user? That's going to be helpful. I'll use that as an example. So all of your Facebook friends, at any moment right now, you have a connection with them. At any moment. You can message them, you can like a post that they've put, you can see what's going on in their life. You can be connected to them instantly. And that's a pretty phenomenal thing. In fact, take away that technology, and let's say that we only have the ability to communicate or to interact with the people in this room. And there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, and a few people back there. So let's say there are a dozen of us in the room, that I have the ability to really interact with 12 of you. But if I add what's in my phone, and my contacts have over 500 contacts, and I don't know how many Facebook friends I have, but I know I have over 500 contacts that I could at some moment take a text and text any one of them. Imagine filling this room with 500 people. Because in my mind, mentally, that's what I've done with this. Now, it's weird for us to think about, but for a teenager, when they are always connected, and we call that hyper-connected, when they're always connected, they have the ability at any moment to be connected to somebody else in their contact list. If this room were filled with 500 people, I'll tell you, I would be a lot more nervous, and I would be jittery. We would be very crowded. I would feel a sense of pressure. Not just because this room might not fit 500 people, but I would feel a sense of pressure of, who am I going to talk to? Who am I going to look at? Who's going to talk to me? What am I going to say? Transport yourself to what it feels like to be holding in your hand the ability to, at any moment, speak and talk to 500 people at one time. And then that never turns itself off. Ever. It's always there. It's like always being in a room with that type of pressure. That's what hyper-connected, and that's when we think about being hyper-connected. That, living with that, is a different reality than what most of us grew up with. Most of us knew what it was like to interact in a room with a certain number of people in it. We knew what it was like to make a phone call to one person, but we don't know what it's like yet, and we're still experiencing what it's like to be able to interact with that many people at any given time, all the time. That's hyper-connected. Imagine growing up and hyper-connected is the reality that you know. That you don't know disconnected. That you don't understand what it's like to have anything else than that. How does that teach you about your interaction with people and the way that you socialize with those people? I think that's kind of where we dive into with our talk about being hyper-connected and with social media. The one thing that's really important, and as I talk with adults a lot about this, is we want to, well, should I take up the phone? Should I block it? Should I time it out? And we always want to restrict or pull back. And I would just kind of say, my opinion is, we're not going to change social media. We're not going to take it away. And so when we say, I want the kids to know what I had, they're not growing up when we grew up. They're growing up now. And we can kind of in a dreamland desire for them to experience what it's like to sit down around a table, and that's the only connection you have at that moment, unless the phone happened to ring. That's the only connection that you have. But they're not growing up that way. They're growing up around a table knowing that they're not just connected to you, but they're connected to every one of their friends at that moment. And that's a different reality. We're not going to change that reality. It is what it is. And what's important for us is to know, how do we parent in that reality? And how do we lead students in youth ministry in that reality? What does that mean for them and the way that they interact with other people? What does that mean for the way that we talk about their interactions with other people? What does it, and of course, the stuff that Chap is saying in there is, I'm sitting there thinking, that's a lot of the stuff that I was researching for this workshop today. And so a lot of what he's going to be saying is going to relate a lot in the way that students are interacting and how they work through that. So that's kind of, I would say, an overview of the state of what social media is. The usage and the stats are incredible. I have, this is one of the things that's linked out there, is this cool little print up, but it's just a Facebook psychology. You can find all kinds of these graphics online, and this just kind of walks you through and kind of gives some different stats about Facebook and about the usage and the things that happen in our brains when that goes on. I think about if you make a Facebook post, and right now if you have a smartphone, you look at your Facebook app, does it have a little red bubble on it that tells you have notifications? Or do you get a text message when you get those? Does yours actually pop up on your screen when you get a notification? I don't know about you, but I'm sitting in there and I get buzzed on my phone. I think, ooh, what was that? And I look and I kind of glance down and I see what that was. Or if I were to make a post here with Chap Clark, is my youth ministry mentor going to say, ooh, Chap Clark? And so like if I make that post, and what happens in my brain, and that's kind of what this talks about, what happens in our brains, goes on, there's this release of dopamine that goes on, where that excitement, that anticipation of something that's going to happen really sets you into this, as this talks about, sort of like an addictive behavior. So where I would make a post hoping that someone's going to talk about it, and then all the time being very anxious and very excited about whether or not that certain individual or certain individuals are going to like or comment on that post. That's a strange way to look at it. I didn't make that post this morning, but that's what is happening. And one of the articles that I came across a while ago was this one. It's called Parents, A Word About Instagram. And this was, I'd say, one of two things that for me triggered an interest in what's going on for teenagers with social media. And this is not written by full-time youth workers, just a middle school small group worker. And so I have a copy of that article here. It's also linked on that link that I gave you. But in this article, and it talks about how this is a female small group leader for 6th grade girls. And she was talking about Instagram. And Instagram is a photo sharing type social network. You can make comments, but it's designed around sharing photos. It talked about how when you go through and here's what happens, you post a picture. She began to survey some of her girls that were in junior high. And she talks about this. She says, talking about it herself, she says, do you remember when you were back to school shopping and you bought the new shirts, the new shoes? How did you know that was a good-looking shirt? She says cute. I wouldn't say that, but she says cute. How did you know that was a cute shirt? Somebody told you, probably, because you were shopping together. Somebody told you. How do people do that now? And this is what she walks through. They snap a photo, a selfie, and they snap it, and they'll put hashtag new shirt, hashtag selfie, and then they'll post it. And what she was realizing with her girls is that they would then see, how many likes did I get on that photo? How many likes did people? And if you get enough likes, then you know, well, that's a shirt that I can keep. And if you don't, you return it. And so it's crowdsourcing out whether or not it's seeking the approval. And she knew that was the reality. And this article is really interesting because she said, I knew that was the reality, but I didn't realize just how much it was. And she even includes some screenshots of kind of her stuff that are on there. But she says, let me explain these numbers. She said, we used to not have numbers growing up, but let me explain. This is what she says. Have you considered that your child is given a numerical value based upon their social standing? For the first time ever, your children can determine their worth using actual numbers. Let me explain. Your daughter has 139 followers, which is 23 less than Jessica, but 56 more than Bo. Your son's photo has 38 likes, which is 14 less than Travis's photo, but 22 more than Spencer's. See what I mean? There's a number attached to them, a ranking. And if you think they don't actually pay attention to this stuff, read the hashtags on these photos. And I thought, okay, I'm not real sure. I did my own research on some of our own students in our own youth group, and I found similar hashtags on there. But the hashtags that it says is more followers, please. It's a hashtag. And so hashtags are all crunched together. It's kind of a way of putting a subtext on something if you're not familiar with hashtags. And so like I would say, presenting at First Christian Johnson City, hashtag excited. And so like a subtext. And it's a way of communicating nonverbal stuff with on your text. And so you can think about hashtags as a way of communicating subtext, a lot of which gets communicated in our facial expressions when we're face to face. But they put more followers, please, hashtag so popular, hashtags 100 likes please, hashtags more likes please. People actually will ask for likes on there. And I said, oh really, do our students do that? And I went on the people that I follow on Instagram, and I realized that they were doing this too. And so you could search, if you have Instagram, search on something that says 30 likes for a hashtag, and you'll be surprised. Just put any number in there. Put 100 likes. Put 20 likes. And you'll realize that they're not only recognizing it, they're asking for it. They're not only recognizing it, but they're asking for it. I was on a trip this summer with our students in the van, and we were taking some photos as a CIY conference, and they had this competition going where you do this Hadouken type thing, and you did this best picture that you could do. Well, they posted it, and then you made it public. And so our students did that. 2 of our students took the exact same photo, but they both posted it to their Instagram. We were riding back in the van, and one of them said, 16 likes, 16 on mine. The other one said, you've only got 12. They were literally, moment by moment, realizing the likes. Now, that was nothing that reflected on them, but if you think they don't notice that when they post a picture of themselves in front of a bathroom mirror, we'd be fooling ourselves. They do. And they rank themselves according to that. They're assigned a number, and they're ranked. Now, connect that thought to what Chap Clark was talking about with adolescence. Connect that thought to what he said about what is my identity, and do I matter? And that's a lot of what you'll find in these articles. The connections are the same. And so this information about social media is, we a lot of times look at it and we say it's just a fun thing. They're just kids chatting. Well, they are, but there's so much more to it than just kids chatting. There's so much more to it. So this article took off. It was crazy viral among youth ministry circles. It went everywhere. Here's a little middle school girl on a blog who doesn't get any followers, gets slammed because all these youth leaders are following over her blog. So she says, I want to write a follow-up. So this is what this article is here. She kind of writes a follow-up article, and she says, update to my previous post. It was shared. It was really cool. I couldn't believe the response I got. And she said, one of the things that I heard, a resounding comment, was this topic is not just for middle schoolers. And she said, you're right. It's for everyone. I found that as I was reading through this, that if I did some self-reflection on myself, it was for me. Because I talked about that Facebook post I could have done this morning with Chap Clark, and who would have noticed that? And if they didn't notice that, how would I feel? And if they did, how would I feel? And I realized that I'm very much right in this as well as a social media user. And the difference that we have as adults is we're able to keep that into perspective, and it's a lot harder for our students to keep that into perspective. They live in black and white worlds, they live in concrete worlds, and the numbers are numbers. I mean, it doesn't get any more black and white than those numbers. And so when we look at that and we think, and she was saying some of the follow-up, she got some comments from some actual middle schoolers who kind of came across this. And this is one, I want to read one of them for you. It said, I'm a 13-year-old girl in 7th grade. My mom showed me the things that you wrote about Instagram. And she goes on, she says a little bit, she says, I will admit I'm guilty of many of the things you talked about. And then she goes on, she says, and here's one more. I'm 14, I'm in 8th grade, I read what you wrote. I realize I have a part of my identity invested in social media. This is not where it should be in the Lord. And she gets all these different comments. Some of the follow-up comments in here are really, really interesting about how that's going on. But one of the things that she realized, and one of the transitions that I want to talk about today, before we kind of just dialogue back and forth a little bit, is I want to transition for you to think about what example are you setting in the way that you use social media, because that's where she takes this article, and it's really good. And I won't repeat that. I'll let you all read that. It's a really fascinating article. But what example are you setting in the way that you use your own Facebook accounts or Instagram account? What example do you set? How are you doing that? And one of the things that we need to recognize is what example are we going to set for our children and for our students, and how to navigate social media, because it's there. We're not going to eliminate it. It's there. We're not going to take it away. We can take up phones in youth group. We can take away internet access at home. But we're just not going to win that battle. And these are billion-dollar companies. We're not going to win that battle. But we need to help them navigate that. And so beginning to think about, how do I use that? How do I respond to that? What are the feelings that I deal with? And working through that. And so this article talks a lot about that. There's another place that I linked. It's called the Digital Kids Initiative, and this is has a lot of information on there. It has a parent's primer on social networking is one of the things that's on there, and so it gives help about cyberbullying, pornography, sexting. It has a parent's primer on electronic addiction. It has a lot of information about that. It talks about the pornography link between social media, and we will talk about that a little bit as well together. But I printed off a lot of it, just one copy in here, but one of the things I printed off for everyone as a family digital covenant of conduct. And this is just an example, but if you've never thought about as a parent, what would be kind of the way we would handle social media, and kind of this is designed to have the child to sign it and for the parent to sign it. It's a free resource. You can download that right now off that website, and it's linked on that site that I gave you. But it talks about I will obey all age limits, and so many of these have age limits on them where you have to be at least 13 years old to have an account. I will obey all age limits. I will not publicly post where I'm at in the course of a day. And that's one of the things that would be on here. I'll agree to follow my parents' guidelines. I'll obey copyright laws. It just kind of goes through and talks about those things so you can clearly outline what's going on. And then what doing something like this does is allows you then to have just kind of a foundational base of how are we going to do this as a family? How are we going to handle and navigate social media as a family? And this is a fantastic resource. So what I would recommend doing is looking at that and adapting it to your specific situation. And to use this, if you are not using this in your own home, to use this with other parents, to use this and to resource them, because I can't tell you how many times I get asked, what am I supposed to do? I know nothing about these social networks. They're all the time on this, and what would I do? That's a really big thing. Let me push an agenda at you here about Snapchat. How many of you have heard about Snapchat? Has anybody not heard about Snapchat? Okay, let me explain Snapchat. Snapchat is super popular in our youth group. In fact, it's more popular among our youth group in Greenville than Facebook is, than Twitter is. It's the most popular social network that I'd say Instagram maybe is as popular. But Snapchat is designed that you take a photo and you send it to someone or to multiple people, and you put a timer on that. When do I want that photo to go away? And so you put like a 10-second timer on that, and then you can it sends it to the other person and notifies you. When that person opens up and sees the photo, it'll time that out, and then it'll go away on their device. And then they reply back. And so what we have all the time is you have people sitting there doing the pictures, and they're goofy pictures. And a lot of times when we post a picture to Facebook, we think this has got to be perfect because it's going to be out there forever. And they kind of recognize that. It's going to be out there. With Snapchat, nobody thinks about it. They think this is just a goofy, you look at me for 3 seconds, it's gone. And so that's kind of the idea of Snapchat. And so you get teenagers sending goofy faces back and forth. When you catch somebody doing something silly looking, you send it on Snapchat. I've had students all the time take just photobomb me so that they can Snapchat somebody else. I'm like, and so they'll just take this ugly looking photo of me and they'll send it out. And the premise of Snapchat is that it's gone from the other user's device within a few seconds. The reality, and this article talks about here, is this says why you should delete Snapchat. And I really hope that you read this if you have any concern about Snapchat at all, because it's going to validate those concerns for you. Some of the stuff about Snapchat, and this is something that teenagers are using all the time in my youth group, is that Snapchat was really created with this idea of sending a lewd photo of yourself to somebody else and knowing that it would go away. And that's kind of the basic, they talk about kind of why that's there. So Snapchat's built on a lie. That's the first thing. it's built on a lie, and they tell you that everything is going to be deleted. The reality is, if you read the terms of service in Snapchat, is that it's not. It's actually saved. And so students are sending photos thinking that they're deleted, and in their terms of service it says we do not guarantee that it's going to be deleted. And so the kid would take a photo, and this is where the link into pornography, I mean, we have to talk about it at some point, is we've got girls and sending racy photos, tempting photos to boys. I know in our own youth group I've got girls who are sending not nude photos, but close to nude photos to a boy to tease them, knowing that you get to look for 3 seconds and it's gone. And that photo they think is gone, but it's stored, and so they had forensic experts look, how much can we get back off of that? They not only can find that information, but they can always, regardless, sometimes they can find the photo, but they can always find who it was sent to and when it was sent and where it was sent from. They can find all that stuff. The other part about Snapchat that's kind of scary is that you agree to terms of service that they can sell that information. And so Snapchat has the right to then sell that. This is a free service. You think about all these other things that are free. Why is Facebook free? Why are these things free? Well, because they're collecting all kinds of data from us, usage data. Who are we sending it to? Where are we sending it from? What were we sending? They're collecting that and they're selling it. And at some point, Snapchat's going to sell their data. And at some point, they're going to sell. I don't know what they're keeping, but they do say in their terms of service that there's no guarantee. They say we will delete, but there's no guarantee of deletion. A kind of a crazy thing, and that's all in this article. And this is a youth worker who's writing this, and they say why you should delete Snapchat. I tell our students this: you're using an app that was created to send naked pictures to one another. And that's what I tell them. And they say, well, that's not what we do it for. I say, that's what it was designed for. Well, we're just having fun. That's what it was designed for. And I just kind of emphasize that, and I'll let them make that choice. I don't think it should be used. I don't think that we should use something that's designed for that. No, for a student to feel like I can send something and it goes away is an incredible sense of pressure, and it just creates all kinds of negative things. I don't like it, but this is an article. Read it, look at that, let that be a resource to you. Take it for what it's worth. In this, he also at the very end of that article links his book, and there's I have this link as well in there, but it's A Parent's Guide to Understanding Social Media. This is on the Simply Youth Ministry sells that book. It's a pretty common book for youth workers to have resourced. And so The Parent's Guide to Social Media, that's linked right there as well. And so Snapchat is one of those things that is a very private one-to-one type thing, or a group thing. One-to-one is real similar to texting, but it goes away. Texting doesn't go away. You can send a picture. You always have that picture. So Snapchat is one of those things that that students are using as well. And the link to pornography there for Snapchat is pretty clear, because that was pretty much the design of what was going on with the creation of Snapchat. But if you have to be aware that pornography is a part of many of these other social networks. One of the largest social networks among teenagers, second to Facebook, is actually Tumblr, which is a blogging platform. And Tumblr has just surged in popularity. And most people say it surged in popularity because of the pornography. Because the Tumblr is a site that's not blocked at people's homes, at people's schools, but it is a site where is just filled with pornography. And it's basically a blogging thing. It's sort of, you can think about, you read a short blog of somebody or a photo, and then you say, I want to reblog that. That's kind of what happens with Tumblr. But that's a place where they're saying that teenagers are going to because of the increase in pornography. Instagram is, a lot of parents just have no idea that Instagram is a large source of pornography. It is absolutely against their terms of service, but Instagram is filled with pornography. If you have any know-how at all, you can find it. If you are just looking through what's popular, you can stumble into it. Vine is was really, really popular before Instagram allowed videos to be shared. Instagram was only photos. Now they do videos. Vine just was like out of nowhere. It seemed like half my youth ministry was using Vine. And it's 6-second video clips, and I still see on Facebook, so-and-so liked Vine video, so-and-so liked Vine. And they still have all these things. What people are doing in Vine is they're going through and they're liking all these popular videos. Vine is a very, very big source. In fact, as people have moved off Vine onto Instagram, Vine is increasingly becoming a more source for pornography as well. And it's really easy to stumble into it on Vine. You're looking through popular videos. It's a lot easier on Vine to stumble into pornography. Here's the problem with that. Most families at home know how to block or to restrict certain sites on their internet. If you don't, there's a resource that you need to look into. It's called OpenDNS. Write that down. Open, and then the letter DNS. OpenDNS. Many of us are familiar with the settings on our particular computer of how to block, but that doesn't block the iPod Touch, the Kindle Fires. It doesn't block all those tablet devices. OpenDNS is a router-based filtering system. So from where kind of the internet is piped into your home, it's a router-based. You change the information on that router, put a really good password on your router. Don't let your kid put that password on the router. And then basically what it does, it creates this screen. Every internet request that you get gets screened through OpenDNS. It doesn't matter if it's your friends who comes over to your house device. It gets screened through that. And then you can pay $20 a year and get a report of that, or you can just have it free if you don't want a report. I would recommend paying for the report. Paying $20 a year for OpenDNS. That's why I recommend to all of our parents who are dealing with pornography. Because what you can do on your computer a lot of times is you can block these main sites, but you can't see, it's a little harder to block the specific things like Instagram and Vine, and those are sources of pornography as well as they are sources of just general social media. The one thing that you really have to do in order to know this is you have to get engaged. I mentioned that earlier. You have to get engaged with what's going on, and you have to encourage other parents to get engaged and to know what's happening. Read articles, learn about it, enough to know what's going on, because you care about your kid, care about what they're doing. Don't play ignorance. Find out. Somebody can help you, and I'll be glad to talk one-on-one as much as I can with any of you who have specific questions. We'll do that in just a minute, but get engaged enough to know what's going on. OpenDNS is something I recommend. I used to recommend something that was on the specific computer. Don't recommend that anymore because of all of the mobile devices. But OpenDNS is fantastic. That only does your home. It doesn't do your neighbor's home. Keep that in mind. And so it only does your home. It doesn't do your neighbor's. But we need to think about how to protect from those things. How do we protect them for using something that has the access to pornography? Pornography is such a large part of social media. It's a part not just in sending pictures back and forth, but in the way that students talk to one another back and forth, in the way that they tempt one another back and forth. I am astounded at how much our female students, tempt the boys, even boys in our own youth group, with their language in text messages and on posts. There's intentional tempting because they feed off of that attention, and so that's a real big part. If you've not had a discussion, if you have a boy and you've not had a discussion with them about pornography and they're older than 10 years old, then you're too late. They've already most likely, according to the stats, been exposed to it, either accidentally or on purpose. I have a 12-year-old boy in my youth ministry who went to Providence Academy, and we live in Greenville, that's a long way to go, Providence Academy. Christian school. Just this week, he ran away from home because his dad came home. He was on the laptop. He bolted out the door and ran away from home, and they had to call the police to find him. Why did you run away from home and bolt out the door? He was on the laptop looking at pornography. So a 12-year-old kid knows his Bible better than almost every other kid in our youth group, and he's bolting out of the door because he's looking at pornography. And the reason he knows he's going to get in trouble is because he's already been caught 3 or 4 other times. And so these are parents that I'm sitting down, I'm talking to. and this is a 12-year-old boy in a Christian school. It is so prevalent. We have to have that conversation. It is a part of hyper-connectivity. It is a part of always being on the devices. It is a reality, and we can talk about that if we want to, but I don't want to spend too much time there if you have social media questions. The last part that I think is really, really, really intriguing to me, I talked about this article is one of the first things that piqued my interest for learning about this. The second thing is I watched a video of a presentation to the Library of Congress where an anthropologist talked about, are these relationships and the interactions online real or are they fake? And the reason that piqued my interest is because I had all the elders and the older people in the church talking about all these kids are just texting and that's not even real. And I thought, oh, you don't understand, it is real. So I started to learn about this, and I found that I just am willing to dive into the big hole of anthropology. I really enjoyed that. I really loved learning about how people were interacting with one another and whether those relationships were real. And so I watched this video. Anthropology and whether these are real, that's something that I'm intrigued by, but I don't know if you all are. Well, I talked too long about all that, but let me field questions for you if you have specific questions, because I tried to kind of shotgun approach everything. And let me see if you all have questions and we can dialogue just a little bit.
One of the things I'm concerned about, my kids aren't there yet, they're a little younger, but with smartphones, what do you do outside your home?
Yeah, there are certain restrictions you can put on the smartphones to limit what they can do and when they can do it. For the most part, that's a place where, for me, I say you've got to, if you trust them enough to have the smartphone and to have the internet access on that smartphone, then you've got to dive in and talk to them about how to use that. In fact, my opinion on filtering is that that's not the solution. Filtering helps, but that's not the solution. Filtering is going to end at 18. When they're out of the house, it ends. And they're going to be a 20-year-old in an apartment on their own, paying for their own stuff, and they're going to be sitting there by themselves. And if they're, I know so many friends of mine are, mid-20s and they're single guys that are living on their own. How are they going to have accountability? I think they're going to make that decision on their own. It's not going to be that I don't know how to get into this because mom put a good password on. So filtering is part of the solution.
Well, and just to not this way before they're 20, because like for example, your child's phone can have filters, but they can go to school on somebody else's phone, or go to the next door neighbor or the kid in the other neighborhood, and their parents might not have filters, and so it's a whole.
I think talking about pornography is really, really important. And talking about the dangers of not just pornography, but the dangers of, one of the things about social media that's happened is your history. Chap talked about this morning about putting it in a shoebox and putting it on the shelf. We can do that. These kids can't do that. Their history cannot be put into a shoebox and put into a shelf. Their history is there for everyone to see. Their history is there for their future employer to Google back and to see. It's permanent. Think about the stuff. I know that I eliminated friends of mine from high school because I said, I just think I would just put that away. I don't want that to be a part of me anymore. They can't, it's so much harder for them to do that. Some of the anthropology stuff talks about all the time co-monitoring of your peers. And what about a friend that you don't really want to be your friend anymore, but then they're all the time looking at your stuff, and then can you unfriend them or can you hide them? And they talk about maintaining your second self, maintaining your online personality is very similar to maintaining your external the way I do right now. Do I smell okay, blah, blah, blah. Have I done everything to walk out of the house and see people? They talk about maintaining your present self. Well, maintaining your online self is actually probably more involved than maintaining your physical body and the way that you talk to people. And so it's a pretty interesting thing to talk to them about. What do you post online, and do you realize the implications of that? And what are you doing when you're online? Who are you speaking to, and who are you talking with, and in what form are you doing that? We've seen how emails have gotten people lawsuits years later. in some of these big companies. The emails don't go away. There are stories of people not getting job applications because of what they posted. This is not the conversation in the woods behind Billy's house up the road that nobody's going to remember, and if they do, you say, I don't remember that. You can't do that anymore. And that creates, we have to engage in that conversation with them and teach them about the permanence of behavior, about the permanence of what's posted. And so I think a combination of filtering and involvement of what's going on. I think the filtering is helpful. I do. I think it helps provide accountability. But I think that what's more important is diving into that conversation and talking about it. When they know that you have enough information to know what they're really dealing with, and I talked in the beginning, one of the most things that rocks my soul the most is thinking about what it's like to walk around being hyper-connected and knowing that at any moment I'm supposed to be available to 500 people at any moment. At any moment when someone texts them, they're supposed to be available. When somebody posts something or they post something, that pressure to me rocks me deeply. And that's what they're living in. Do I understand what that feels like? And that's so much. I mean, I don't want to repeat what Chap's saying. That's very much plays into what he's talking about today. So I think it's a combination. I think the dialogue is really, really, really important, is dialoguing with them. And if you read some of these articles, especially these two about Instagram, I think that would be talking, how do I have that dialogue and what would I say to them about the way they engage in that? And do they realize the implications? Letting them, your children, read those articles is fine too. I don't know if that is right on the money. I know it's difficult.
What would happen to a kid today who was severely restricted in this when he gets to junior high?
Restricted, what do you mean?
So if he had parents who were really clamped down on, would it be the equivalent of being an Amish kid in New York City, just being completely ostracized or not being with it, what everybody else is doing? How bad would that be? You sort of pretty much come out and said you're into it, you think it's...
You have a life story, I can tell.
My best friend was that way. Both my best friend, my best friend in high school was that way, my best friend in college is that way now. They're like completely disconnected. Like you have to guide them through a lot of social situations because they just don't know what's going on. Like they're just completely confused and they're like hermits a lot of times because I have pretty much all the social media you can think of because that's just the generation I grew up in, but she didn't because her parents wouldn't let her. And she doesn't really get along with anyone because she doesn't know how to interact with them. It's crazy to see how, like, I used to be that way because my mom was really strict and then my dad convinced her to not be strict. And I saw myself grow out of it and so I can help them grow out of it, but you have to like it's better off for your kids if their parents are going to be strict, that they can find someone who can help them grow out of it. Like their connections in the real world are a lot better than their connections are online, but their connections online are really important to development.
I also think that I have adult children, but I think waiting until they are 13, there's a reason that it's 13 for their safety, first of all, because they'll just say, I'm at the mall, and then everybody knows you're at the mall, for example. That number is relevant. They will give less information after 13. I mean, it's just 8th grade is a big change in the way they think. They learn some things to be private, but I don't know. I didn't get my phones till 8th grade.
A lot of it is that mom and dad are gone tonight. I'm home alone. Mm-hmm. Predators are out there too. And if we're not teaching them not to post that stuff, that's one of the things we always preach is don't, where you're at is important. Don't put it on there. I went on a youth retreat this weekend with my youth group. Well, I didn't post I was at a youth retreat because my house is empty. And it's just as bad when you've got young girls, young boys at home by themselves, 13 years old, because there's guys and women waiting for that to happen,
For me, my opinion is not to say that that's not true. My opinion is a greater danger than a predator is the danger that Chap's talking about, which is the development of the self. The development of the self is big. Without the, and that's where, to me, the anthropology part of it just tickles my brain. But without the ability to have self-reflection, without stepping back and having self-reflection, you have no ability to know who you actually are. You're just always responding to someone else. You're always responding to somebody like, somebody text, somebody do this, respond, and you never have time to develop self. We need boredom to develop our self-identity. We need that. We need time to step back and to reflect back on what's going on in order to know who am I enough to then step back forward and to engage. The other piece of it I would say is just like you were saying, it's not going to go away. At some point, even someone who was sheltered is going to have to then integrate in. It's not going to go away. I mean, unless you really are realistically looking at going and live in the woods for the rest of your life, it's not going to go away. They're going to at some point have to integrate. Does integrating as a 13-year-old better than integrating as a 10-year-old? In a lot of ways, yes. And you mentioned that. In a lot of ways it is. But the stuff, there are some articles that, there's a book that is, that I linked to in that stuff that is not a Christian book, and it does have curse words in it. I'm really sorry, but it's so interesting that talks about some of that stuff about the way that the internet and social media deal with us in an kind of in an anthropology kind of way, and the way that we interact. And so I was going to see if I could find this quote that. So they talk about this sociability stuff, that we used to think that there was a correlation to how social you were. If you were popular in school face-to-face, you would just get richer online. And they're finding the research is not that. That the people who are inclined to talk face-to-face are not the same people who are inclined to talk online. And so it's not just the rich are getting rich. And that was a really interesting thing that talks about why is that. And so the people who are afraid, do I smell, do I look weird, when they're talking face-to-face, they may actually find themselves really, really social online. And so it talks about that sociability stuff on there. I can't find it in there. It's a really cool thought about how people develop and their identity. And let me just say that I think it's really important to do what Chap's talking about, the identity stuff, the autonomy stuff that he was talking about this morning in that session, and how does social media play into that? It's a huge, huge, huge part of that, and how they do that. What do my peers expect me to be? And do I have as many likes as so-and-so has? And that's such a big part of it.
Well, and kind of like bouncing off what you're talking about is, I think as this is increasing, our role as a parent, we have to be much more purposeful in getting involved with our kids and talking to them and finding opportunities to pull them aside and say, hey, let's go grab a hot chocolate and let's talk about what's going on with you. And so we kind of know what's going on with them, with their friends, and we can kind of help them think through things, kind of pull them aside from all of that and give them kind of our wisdom and our knowledge and pull, our Christianity into it and our faith and kind of help them think through all that. So they have something of substance, because this is here. Mm-hmm. We can't say, just go away. It's not going to go away. Whereas back in the day, parents were there, but I don't think the parents had to be as purposeful in their, because it was there. It was there at the table. It was there when you were at the house. You were just there together. But I think now our kids are pulled so much into this whole undercurrent. It's like an altered reality that they're in. It's like this whole other thing that's going on that, like what you were saying earlier, and you were saying, if they're not connected into it, it's like they're just like they're walking on Mars. I mean, there's this whole other current of communication that's going on and things that are happening. But I think all of that requires us as parents to be purposeful and consistent in reaching out to our kids. And I know a lot of us are busy and we have jobs, and time is hard to find. I have to do this. I have to do this. We have to understand that our kids need us, and they will listen, and especially if we start earlier, but you've got to make that effort. And it's scary to think how much as parents we don't really get that.
A lot of times we're really good at talking about how did you feel at school when somebody commented about the way you were dressed. But we don't talk about how did you feel when your post didn't get as many likes as your friend's post. How did you like it when you posted a beach picture and it got 20 likes and your friend posted a beach picture and it got 200? How did you feel? What did that do? We talk about that. We're really good because we remember going to school. How did you feel when nobody sat with you at the lunch table? And that's social interaction. We know that because we lived that. But we're not as good talking about the way social interaction happens online. If I can say, please remember, never communicate that that's not real social interaction for them, because it is. Don't communicate that it's not. They will write you off instantly, and you'll have closed that window into them. Because to them, it is their reality. It is the way that they are talking and they are interacting. I think about, for those of us who have the perspective to look backwards on the iPhone or the smartphone coming out, I think about 2008 is when the smartphone came out. And I know as a youth minister, my life changed. The way I did youth ministry fundamentally changed because of an iPhone. Unbelievable. I used to have to print out things like this folder here, and I would have a trip, and I would have maps in the front, and I'd have all this stuff about where I'm going. I can literally hop in a van and pull out the phone, and my maps are right there. It's fundamentally changed. It's just one example of how it's changed the way and I can think of example after example after example about the way it's changed. And think about how recent that is. 2008. That's not that long ago. And it's fundamentally already that quickly, for old people, changed how we do things. And I'm not that old, but I'm old enough now to realize that's fundamentally changed the way I've done ministry and the way I've done life. And fast forward, what's 5 years? What's 10 years? It's going to continue to fundamentally change. One thing that's not new is people have always sought out social connection without face-to-face. Letter writing is a tool. The written word is a tool, and it was adopted. A pencil and a pen is a way to seek out social connection without being physically in a room with someone. That's been going on for ages, and that's a tool. And so is the telephone is a tool. And it's a tool that said, I want to socially connect with somebody. Nobody said that telephone's not real. That's not even a real person. That's not a real relationship. No, people didn't say that. Now, maybe early on, I'm not old enough to know that. Maybe early on that they did. And people didn't say, oh, that letter that you're writing to that soldier in Iraq, that's not even a real person. It's not even a real connection. Those aren't real feelings or real words. Nobody said that. But what we're saying a lot of times with social media is we're saying, oh, that's not real, that's just a virtual world. That's just virtual play, and that's not reality. Reality is face-to-face. That's not reality. But we never did that for us when we were letter writing or phone calls. But what we're doing a lot of times when we say that's virtual is we're saying to them what you know as reality is not reality. And we've distanced ourselves. Because to them that's real social connection. And what they're doing actually is more complicated and more complex than anything that we ever did when we were their age. The complexities of their social connections are phenomenal. And it's radically changing the way that they interact and the way that they discover self and how that process happens. That's why what Chap was saying this morning is really cool.
One more thing to add. When I turned 13, my parents and my grandparents and my aunts and my uncles and all my cousins that are in like their 60s and 70s or like second cousins, they all got a Facebook. And they all, like, they were my first friends. I had like 100 friends, but it was all family. And then that's what kept me grounded on Facebook and stuff, was all of my family got a Facebook the same day I did. If they didn't already have one. My dad already had one. But everybody else did. And it wasn't like, oh, I have Facebook, but I'm never going to get on it. My grandma gets on it. She's the only grandparent left alive. She's 75 years old. She gets on it every single day, and she sends me a message every single day about something that I posted. So I know that everyone in my family sees what I put on there, and they're watching what I'm doing. So
the accountability that you have.
Yeah.
That, you know.
I mean, I'm on my own. I'm 20 years old. I don't even live at home, but I still have that accountability for my family.
Good point.
The accountability doesn't happen with Snapchat. And it doesn't happen with Instagram. Parents never made the transition to Instagram that they were on. There's a phrase in social media that says, my mom just friended me. And that was like a flea phrase for all of the kids. And so you're at the age where Facebook, people younger than you don't create Facebook accounts very much anymore. And if they do, it's to play games. They don't do it for the social networking. And so that's continuing to evolve and continuing to change. But that co-monitoring that I talked about and mentioned earlier is mentioned in one of these books here. Well, what does it feel like to be co-monitored all the time by past peers, by family, and what's that like, and what is the pressure that is? That's an interesting type of thing that is in one of those books. When you can dig into that if it tickles your brain like it does mine. The links are all there for you to do that. But we've reached the end of our time for this, and I would be glad to talk and to interact and to dialogue and to point you to stuff as much as I can. I'll hang around and be around here today, so thanks for that. Let me pray for us. God, as we would navigate social media and we would navigate the relationships we have with one another, one thing's for sure. We know that you've created us to be in a relationship with one another. And we want to never forget the power of relationship. It's the power of relationship that is the foundation of our creation and our relationship with you. Help us to mirror to students and to our children that relationships are powerful, but they're really something that you created and something that is divine in its nature. And so God, help us to do relationship and to do life in a way that honors you. I pray in Christ's name. Amen.